The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand courtyard of Buckingham Palace as hundreds of guests began arriving for the annual royal garden party. Princess Charlotte, now 8 years old, stood at her bedroom window watching the preparations below, her small hands pressed against the cool glass as she observed the bustling activity of palace staff arranging tables, setting up decorations and ensuring everything was perfect for the Queen's special event. Charlotte had always been fascinated by the palace guards. Their tall black hats, bright red uniforms, and perfectly straight posture made them look like characters from her favorite storybooks. Today was special because she would finally get to attend her first major royal event, alongside her parents, Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Downstairs in the palace kitchen, the staff worked tirelessly to prepare hundreds of delicate sandwiches, scones, and pastries. The head chef barked orders while servers polished silver trays until they gleamed. Everyone knew that today's event would be attended by important dignitaries, charity representatives, and members of the public who had been specially invited to meet the royal family. As Charlotte got dressed in her carefully chosen blue dress with white flowers, her nanny explained the importance of the day. "Today you'll meet many wonderful people who do important work helping others," she said, while brushing Charlotte's hair. "Remember to be polite, smile, and listen when people speak to you." The young princess nodded seriously. She had been practicing her curtsy and had memorized the proper way to shake hands. Her parents had spent weeks preparing her for this moment, explaining how royal events worked and what would be expected of her. In the palace security room, guards reviewed their positions one final time. Each guard had been assigned specific areas to monitor, ensuring the safety of all guests and royal family members. Among them was Guard Thompson, a 25-year-old man who had recently joined the Queen's Guard after serving in the military. This was his first major royal event, and he felt both nervous and honored to be part of such an important day. Guard Thompson had grown up in a small village outside London. His father had been a police officer, and his mother worked as a school teacher. They had instilled in him values of service, duty, and respect for others. When he received the opportunity to join the Queen's Guard, his whole family celebrated. It was a dream come true for a young man who had always admired the royal family and their dedication to public service. The palace doors opened at precisely 2 o'clock, and guests began flowing into the beautiful gardens. Ladies wore their finest dresses and elegant hats while gentlemen donned their best suits. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and anticipation as people hoped for a chance to meet members of the royal family. Princess Charlotte walked alongside her parents, her small hand tucked safely in her mother's grasp. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she took in the sea of colorful dresses, fancy hats, and smiling faces. The gardens had been transformed into a magical wonderland with flowers in full bloom, perfectly manicured lawns, and elegant tea tables set up throughout the space. As the afternoon progressed, Charlotte watched her parents gracefully move from group to group, speaking with guests and listening to their stories. She observed how her mother bent down to speak with children, how her father laughed genuinely at people's jokes, and how both of them seemed genuinely interested in every person they met. The Queen's Guard stood at their designated positions around the garden's perimeter. Their job was to remain alert and professional, while blending into the background of the celebration. Guard Thompson had been positioned near the main garden path, where many guests would pass by throughout the afternoon. Charlotte noticed how people would sometimes stop to take pictures with the guards or ask them questions. She watched as Guard Thompson remained perfectly still, his expression serious and professional. Something about his kind eyes and gentle demeanor caught her attention. Unlike some of the other guards who seemed stern and unapproachable, there was something warm about Guard Thompson that made Charlotte feel curious about him. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, more guests arrived and the garden party reached its peak activity. Musicians played soft classical music near the rose garden, while servers circulated with trays of tea and delicate treats. The atmosphere was perfect, with gentle conversations and laughter filling the air. Charlotte's parents were called away to meet with a group of charity representatives, and she found herself standing near Guard Thompson's position with her nanny close by. She studied his uniform, noticing every detail from the shiny buttons to the perfectly pressed fabric. She wondered what it would be like to stand so still for so long, and whether the heavy hat was uncomfortable to wear. The young princess had always been taught to treat everyone with respect and kindness, regardless of their job or position. Her parents had explained that every person who worked at the palace was important and deserved to be treated well. This lesson had stuck with Charlotte, and she naturally felt drawn to people who served others. As guests continued to enjoy the beautiful afternoon, nobody could have predicted the events that would soon unfold. The peaceful garden party was about to become the setting for a moment that would reveal Princess Charlotte's true character and her instinctive desire to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The stage was set for an incident that would test the young princess's courage and show the world that even at 8 years old, she possessed the strong moral compass and brave heart that would define her future role in the royal family. Guard Thompson continued his duty, unaware that he was about to become the center of an unexpected situation that would change his life forever. The garden party was in full swing when an unexpected incident began to develop near the main pathway, where Guard Thompson stood at attention. A group of distinguished guests, including several foreign ambassadors and their wives, had been enjoying their afternoon tea when one of the ambassadors' wives accidentally dropped her expensive pearl necklace. The delicate string of pearls scattered across the grass, with individual pearls rolling in different directions. The woman gasped in distress as the necklace had been a family heirloom passed down through generations. Several guests immediately began helping her search for the precious pearls, getting down on their hands and knees to look through the perfectly manicured grass. Guard Thompson noticed the commotion from his peripheral vision, but remained in his professional stance, as protocol demanded. However, when he saw a particularly valuable-looking pearl rolling directly toward his feet, his natural instinct to help others kicked in. Without thinking, he slightly shifted his position and used his foot to gently stop the pearl from rolling further away. His intention was purely to help preserve the precious item until someone could retrieve it. In his mind, he was simply doing what any decent person would do when they saw someone in distress. Growing up in his small village, helping neighbors had always been second nature to him, and those values didn't disappear just because he wore a royal uniform. Unfortunately, his small movement was noticed by Lady Pemberton, one of the Queen's senior aides who was known for her strict interpretation of royal protocol. Lady Pemberton was a woman in her 60s who had served the royal household for over 30 years. She prided herself on maintaining the highest standards and had little tolerance for what she perceived as breaches in proper conduct. From her vantage point several yards away, Lady Pemberton saw Guard Thompson move his foot and immediately assumed the worst. She didn't see the fallen pearls or understand the context of his action. All she saw was a guard who appeared to be fidgeting, or worse yet, showing disrespect during a formal royal event. Lady Pemberton's face flushed red with indignation. In her mind, the reputation of the entire royal household was at stake. She had worked too hard and too long to maintain the palace's impeccable standards to allow such behavior to go uncorrected. Without taking a moment to investigate the situation further, she began marching toward Guard Thompson with determination in her step. Princess Charlotte, who had been observing the scene unfold from nearby, immediately understood what was happening. Her young eyes had caught sight of the scattered pearls and had watched as Guard Thompson tried to help. She realized that the guard's small movement had been an act of kindness, not a breach of duty. The 8-year-old princess felt her heart race as she watched Lady Pemberton approaching Guard Thompson with obvious anger on her face. Charlotte had learned to read people's emotions and body language from watching her parents interact with others during royal duties. She could tell that Lady Pemberton was upset, and that Guard Thompson was about to be unfairly blamed for something he didn't do wrong. Meanwhile, other palace staff members began to take notice of Lady Pemberton's purposeful stride across the garden. Whispers began to spread among the servers and junior staff members, who recognized the signs of an impending confrontation. Some had witnessed Lady Pemberton's strict disciplinary actions before, and knew that once she set her mind on correcting someone, she rarely listened to explanations. Guard Thompson remained at his post. Still unaware that he was about to become the center of unwanted attention, he continued to focus on his duties, scanning the crowd for any potential security concerns while trying to remain as invisible as possible. The training he had received emphasized the importance of blending into the background during royal events. The ambassador's wife and her helpers continued searching for the scattered pearls, grateful for any assistance they could get. They had recovered most of the precious gems, but a few were still missing in the grass. The stress of potentially losing her family heirloom was evident on the woman's face, as she carefully examined each recovered pearl. As Lady Pemberton drew closer to guard Thompson's position, other senior staff members began to notice the developing situation. However, royal protocol dictated that junior staff should not interfere with senior aides' decisions, especially during such an important event. The complex hierarchy of the palace meant that questioning Lady Pemberton's judgment could result in serious consequences for anyone bold enough to speak up. Charlotte watched all of this unfold with growing concern. Her parents had taught her about fairness and standing up for what was right, but she was also aware of her young age and the expectations placed upon her during formal events. The internal conflict between doing what felt right and following proper protocol created a tension that she had never experienced before. The garden party continued around them, with most guests remaining unaware of the drama developing near the pathway. Conversations flowed, tea was sipped, and laughter filled the air while this smaller human drama played out among the flowers and perfectly trimmed hedges. Lady Pemberton was now only a few steps away from Guard Thompson, her expression stern and her posture rigid with authority. She had already decided in her mind that this young guard needed to be removed from his position immediately to maintain the dignity of the royal event. Her years of experience had taught her that swift action was often necessary to prevent small problems from becoming larger scandals. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only Guard Thompson's composure, but also Princess Charlotte's courage to do what she believed was right, even when it meant challenging someone in a position of authority. Lady Pemberton reached Guard Thompson's position with the full authority of her 3 decades of royal service behind her. Her voice, though kept low to avoid disturbing the nearby guests, carried the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Guard Thompson," she said sharply, positioning herself directly in front of him. "Your conduct today has been completely unacceptable. Moving from your assigned position during a royal event is a serious breach of protocol that cannot be overlooked." Guard Thompson's eyes widened slightly, though he maintained his professional composure. He had no idea what Lady Pemberton was referring to, as his movement had been so slight and his intention so innocent. "Ma'am, I'm not certain what you're referring to," he replied respectfully, keeping his voice steady despite the confusion and growing anxiety he felt. "Don't pretend ignorance with me." "Young man," Lady Pemberton continued, her voice growing colder, "I saw you fidgeting and moving about when you should have been standing at perfect attention. Such behavior reflects poorly on the entire Queen's Guard and shows a lack of respect for this important occasion." Several other palace staff members had begun to gather at a respectful distance, drawn by the unusual sight of Lady Pemberton publicly addressing a guard during an active event. Among them was Mrs. Davies, the head housekeeper, and Mr. Patterson, a senior butler who had worked at the palace for nearly 20 years. Both watched with concern, knowing Lady Pemberton's reputation for swift and sometimes harsh disciplinary actions. Guard Thompson felt his heart sink as he realized that his attempt to help had been misinterpreted as misconduct. He wanted to explain about the scattered pearls and his intention to prevent one from rolling away, but Lady Pemberton's stern expression and authoritative tone made it clear that she wasn't interested in hearing explanations. "Ma'am, if I could just explain what happened," Guard Thompson began, but Lady Pemberton raised her hand to silence him. "There is nothing to explain," she stated firmly. "Your actions speak for themselves. I'm afraid you'll need to be escorted from your position immediately. Such disrespect during a royal garden party is simply intolerable." Princess Charlotte, who had been watching this exchange with growing distress, felt her chest tighten with indignation. She could see the confusion and hurt in Guard Thompson's eyes, and she knew with absolute certainty that he was being treated unfairly. The 8-year-old princess had been raised to understand the importance of justice and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The ambassador's wife, still searching for her missing pearls nearby, began to overhear the conversation between Lady Pemberton and Guard Thompson. She looked up from her search, beginning to piece together what was happening. Her expression showed growing understanding and concern, as she realized the guard might be in trouble for trying to help her. "Furthermore," Lady Pemberton continued, her voice taking on an even more severe tone, "I will be recommending that you be removed from royal duties entirely. We cannot have guards who cannot maintain proper decorum during important events. Your behavior today demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of what it means to serve the royal family." The words hit Guard Thompson like a physical blow. Being a member of the Queen's Guard had been his dream job, the culmination of years of training and dedication. The thought of losing this position, especially for something he had done with good intentions, felt devastating. He could imagine having to call his parents and explain that he had been dismissed in disgrace from his dream job on his very first major event. Other guards stationed nearby began to notice the commotion, though they remained at their posts as training dictated. Several felt sympathy for their colleague, as they all understood how easy it would be to make an innocent mistake that could be misinterpreted by senior staff. The pressure of performing perfectly during royal events was enormous, and they all lived with the constant fear of making a career-ending error. Princess Charlotte stepped slightly closer to the scene, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Every fiber of her being wanted to speak up and defend Guard Thompson, but she was acutely aware that challenging Lady Pemberton in front of other staff members and guests would be unprecedented for someone her age. Lady Pemberton turned to signal to two other staff members who had approached the area. "Please escort Guard Thompson from the premises," she instructed them, "and ensure that his supervisor is notified immediately about this incident. A full report will be filed before the end of the day." The injustice of the situation became too much for Princess Charlotte to bear silently. She had been taught that with privilege came responsibility, and that responsibility included standing up for what was right. Her parents had always told her that being royal meant serving others and protecting those who needed protection. Guard Thompson began to remove his ceremonial gloves, his movements slow and defeated. The reality of losing his position was starting to sink in, and he felt a crushing disappointment that threatened to overwhelm his professional composure. He thought about his parents' pride when he had first put on the uniform, and how that pride would turn to concern and sadness when they learned of his dismissal. The moment had arrived when Princess Charlotte would have to choose between staying silent and safe in the background, or stepping forward to challenge an adult in authority, to defend someone who couldn't defend himself. The weight of that choice felt enormous for such a young person, but her moral compass pointed clearly in only one direction. Princess Charlotte took a deep breath and stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the tense atmosphere with surprising clarity and authority. "Lady Pemberton, please wait," she said, her words carefully chosen but filled with determination that surprised everyone present. The entire scene seemed to freeze for a moment. Lady Pemberton turned around, her expression shifting from stern authority to complete shock at being addressed by the 8-year-old princess. The other staff members looked equally surprised, as they had never witnessed such a young member of the royal family directly intervene in palace business. "Your Royal Highness," Lady Pemberton began, quickly adjusting her tone to one of respect mixed with confusion. "I'm handling a disciplinary matter that doesn't require your attention. Perhaps you should return to your parents?" But Charlotte stood her ground, her posture straight and her chin raised in a way that reminded everyone present that she was indeed royal blood, despite her young age. "I saw what happened," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the small group that had gathered. "Guard Thompson was trying to help the lady who dropped her necklace. The ambassador's wife, who had been listening to the conversation while continuing her search, immediately looked up and moved closer to the group. "Yes," she called out, her accent adding urgency to her words. "My pearls scattered everywhere, and I saw this kind guard try to help keep one from rolling away." Lady Pemberton's face began to show the first signs of uncertainty as she processed this new information. However, her years of rigid adherence to protocol made it difficult for her to immediately accept that she might have made an error in judgment. "Your Highness," Lady Pemberton said, attempting to maintain her authority, "even if that were the case, proper protocol requires guards to remain at their positions regardless of circumstances. Moving from one's post is still a serious breach of conduct." Princess Charlotte looked directly at Lady Pemberton, her young eyes showing a maturity that seemed beyond her years. "But isn't helping people in need more important than standing perfectly still?" she asked. "My parents always teach me that being royal means serving others and helping when we can." Guard Thompson watched this exchange with amazement and growing hope. He had never expected that someone would stand up for him, especially not a member of the royal family. The princess's words touched him deeply, as they reflected the same values of service and kindness that had motivated his actions in the first place. Other staff members began to murmur quietly among themselves. with some nodding in agreement with the princess's words. Mrs. Davies, the head housekeeper, stepped slightly forward. "If I may," she said respectfully, "I also witnessed the incident." The guard's movement was minimal and appeared to be motivated by helpfulness rather than negligence. The ambassador's wife moved even closer to the group, still holding several recovered pearls in her gloved hands. "Please," she said earnestly, "I must insist that this young man was only trying to be helpful. In my country, we would consider his actions to be those of a true gentleman. He should be commended, not punished." Lady Pemberton found herself in an increasingly difficult position. The growing chorus of voices defending Guard Thompson, led by Princess Charlotte herself, made it clear that her interpretation of events had been incorrect. However, admitting error in front of junior staff members would be a significant challenge to her authority and reputation. Princess Charlotte sensed Lady Pemberton's internal struggle and decided to offer her a graceful way out of the situation. "Perhaps," the young princess suggested diplomatically, "there was simply a misunderstanding about what happened. We all want what's best for the royal household and for people to be treated fairly." The wisdom in Charlotte's words impressed everyone present. Despite her young age, she had found a way to resolve the conflict without humiliating Lady Pemberton or creating lasting bad feelings among the staff. Her natural diplomatic skills were already evident, showing promise for her future royal duties. Guard Thompson felt overwhelming gratitude toward the princess, but protocol prevented him from speaking directly to her without permission. Instead, he maintained his professional stance while internally marveling at the courage and kindness of someone so young who was willing to stand up for a virtual stranger. "Mr. Patterson," the senior butler cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps this matter could be resolved without further disruption to the garden party," he suggested gently. "The guests are beginning to notice the gathering here." Lady Pemberton looked around and realized that several party guests had indeed begun to take notice of the unusual congregation of staff members. The last thing anyone wanted was to create a scene that might draw unwanted attention to internal palace matters during such an important event. "Very well," Lady Pemberton said stiffly, her pride still somewhat wounded, but recognizing the need to restore normalcy to the event. "If there has been a misunderstanding about the circumstances, then perhaps disciplinary action is not warranted at this time." Princess Charlotte smiled warmly at this announcement, her relief evident to everyone present. "Thank you, Lady Pemberton," she said graciously. "I'm sure Guard Thompson will continue to serve with excellence." The ambassador's wife approached Guard Thompson directly. "Young man," she said with genuine warmth, "I want to personally thank you for your kindness in trying to help with my pearls. Your parents raised you well, and your queen should be proud to have you in her service." Guard Thompson finally allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine expression of emotion he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. "Thank you, ma'am," he replied quietly. "I'm honored to serve." The crisis had been averted, but the impact of Princess Charlotte's brave intervention would continue to resonate with everyone who witnessed it. As the small crowd began to disperse and return to their duties, the impact of what had just occurred started to settle in among those who had witnessed it. Princess Charlotte had not only prevented an injustice, but had done so with remarkable grace and diplomacy that impressed even the most experienced palace staff members. Mrs. Davies approached Princess Charlotte with deep respect in her eyes. "Your Highness," she said quietly, "what you did just now showed tremendous courage and compassion. The entire staff will remember your kindness today." The head housekeeper had worked at the palace long enough to recognize true leadership qualities when she saw them, and she knew she had just witnessed something special. Word of the incident began to spread quietly through the palace staff network, as news always did in such a close-knit environment. Kitchen staff, gardeners, and security personnel all heard variations of the story about how the young princess had stood up to defend a guard who was being unfairly treated. With each telling, the admiration for Princess Charlotte grew stronger. Guard Thompson returned to his position, but his entire perspective on the day had changed. What had begun as his worst nightmare had transformed into something he would treasure for the rest of his life. The knowledge that a member of the royal family had cared enough to defend him filled him with a renewed sense of purpose and dedication to his duties. The ambassador's wife made sure to speak with other guests about the incident, praising both Guard Thompson's helpfulness and Princess Charlotte's intervention. Her positive words helped ensure that the story spread among the international guests, creating goodwill and admiration for the young princess's character. Lady Pemberton, meanwhile, found herself reflecting on the events with growing respect for Princess Charlotte's handling of the situation. Despite being corrected by someone so young, she began to appreciate the diplomatic skill the princess had shown in resolving the conflict without causing lasting embarrassment or resentment. As the garden party continued, Princess Charlotte rejoined her parents who had been engaged with other guests during the incident. Her mother, Catherine, noticed immediately that something significant had happened. "You look quite pleased with yourself, sweetheart," she observed with a knowing smile. "I helped someone today, Mummy," Charlotte replied simply, her natural modesty preventing her from elaborating on her heroic intervention, but her satisfaction was evident in her bright eyes and proud posture. Prince William bent down to his daughter's level. "That's wonderful, Charlotte. Helping others is one of the most important things we can do, especially when they can't help themselves." His words reinforced the values that had motivated Charlotte's actions, confirming that she had acted in accordance with the principles her parents had taught her. Throughout the remainder of the afternoon, various staff members found subtle ways to express their gratitude to Princess Charlotte. A server offered her an extra special treat. The head gardener made sure she received a beautiful flower to take home, and several guards nodded respectfully when she passed by their positions. The story of Charlotte's intervention reached the ears of senior palace officials, including the Queen's private secretary. Such displays of character and leadership from a young royal were always noted and appreciated, as they boded well for the future of the monarchy. Guard Thompson's supervisor, upon hearing the full story of what had transpired, made a point of visiting him at his post. "I understand you conducted yourself admirably today, Thompson," he said privately, "both in your attempt to help the ambassador's wife and in your professional handling of the subsequent misunderstanding." "Thank you, sir," Guard Thompson replied, though he knew the real credit belonged to Princess Charlotte. "I was fortunate to have witnesses who could clarify the situation." The supervisor nodded knowingly. "Indeed, though I suspect the most important witness was the one who spoke up when it mattered most. That kind of character recognition is rare at any age, but particularly remarkable in someone so young." As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, the garden party slowly wound down. Guests began to make their farewells, expressing their gratitude to the royal family for a wonderful afternoon. Many mentioned to Princess Charlotte how lovely it had been to meet her. Though most were unaware of the drama she had helped resolve, the ambassador's wife made a special point of approaching Princess Charlotte before leaving. "Your Royal Highness," she said with genuine warmth, "meeting you today has been the highlight of my visit to England. Your kindness and courage are an inspiration, and your country should be very proud of you." Charlotte curtsied politely and thanked the woman, but the praise made her feel slightly uncomfortable. In her mind, she had simply done what anyone should do when they saw something unfair happening. The idea that this made her special or praiseworthy seemed strange to her young perspective. As the last guests departed and the palace staff began cleaning up the garden, the day's events continued to resonate throughout the royal household. Kitchen staff discussed the incident while washing dishes. Guards talked about it during shift changes, and senior staff members made notes in their daily reports about the princess's exemplary behavior. The incident had revealed something important about Princess Charlotte's character that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. She had shown that true royalty wasn't about titles or ceremonies, but about having the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult or uncomfortable to do so. Guard Thompson went home that evening with a story he would tell his children and grandchildren. Instead of a tale of humiliation and career disappointment, he had a story of unexpected kindness and protection from someone who had no obligation to help him, but chose to do so anyway. In the weeks following the garden party incident, the ripple effects of Princess Charlotte's intervention continued to spread throughout the palace and beyond. The story had become legendary among the staff, with new employees being told about. The day an 8-year-old princess stood up to a senior aide to protect a guard who was being unfairly treated. Guard Thompson found his experience at the palace transformed completely. Instead of being known as the guard who had been disciplined at his first major event, he became known as the guard whom Princess Charlotte had defended. This reputation, opened doors for him and created connections with other staff members who respected his character and the princess's recognition of it. The incident had also strengthened the relationship between Princess Charlotte and the palace staff. Word had spread that she was someone who genuinely cared about the people who worked to support her family, and this created a special bond of loyalty and affection that would serve her well throughout her life. Lady Pemberton, after some initial wounded pride, came to appreciate the lesson she had learned that day. She began to approach disciplinary matters with more consideration for context and circumstances, rather than rigid adherence to protocol alone. The incident had made her a more thoughtful and fair supervisor, though she never forgot the embarrassment of being corrected by a child. Princess Charlotte's parents, Prince William and Catherine, were incredibly proud when they learned the full details of what their daughter had done. They realized that their teachings about service, fairness, and protecting others had truly taken root in their young daughter's heart. This gave them confidence that she was developing the character necessary for her future royal responsibilities. The ambassador's wife became an unofficial ambassador for Princess Charlotte's reputation in diplomatic circles. At embassy parties and international events, she would tell the story of the kind young princess who had shown such wisdom and courage. These stories helped build positive relationships between the British royal family and foreign dignitaries. Several months later, Guard Thompson was selected for a special assignment protecting visiting dignitaries during a state dinner. His supervisor explained that his exemplary conduct during the garden party incident had been noted in his file and had contributed to his selection for this prestigious duty. The career setback he had feared had instead become a career opportunity. Princess Charlotte began to receive letters from children around the world who had heard the story of her brave intervention. Young people wrote to tell her how her example had inspired them to stand up for classmates who were being treated unfairly, or to help others who needed assistance. The incident had become a teaching tool for parents and teachers who wanted to illustrate the importance of moral courage. The relationship between Princess Charlotte and the palace guards became particularly special. They all knew the story of how she had protected one of their own, and they developed a protective and affectionate attitude toward her that went beyond their professional duties. When she walked through the palace corridors, guards would often share small smiles or nods of acknowledgement that conveyed their respect and appreciation. Mrs. Davies, the head housekeeper, made sure that new staff members heard the story during their orientation. She used it to illustrate that the royal family genuinely cared about their employees and that their service was valued and appreciated. This helped create a positive work environment where staff members felt respected and motivated to do their best work. The incident also influenced how Princess Charlotte was perceived by the media and the public. While the specific details weren't immediately reported in newspapers, stories began to emerge about her compassionate nature and mature character. Royal correspondents noted that she seemed to possess unusual wisdom and empathy for someone her age. Guard Thompson's parents were eventually able to visit the palace for a special tour, and they had the opportunity to meet Princess Charlotte briefly. The meeting was arranged quietly by palace staff, who felt it would be meaningful for both the guard's family and the princess to connect. The gratitude in their eyes when they thanked her for helping their son moved Charlotte deeply and reinforced her understanding of how her actions could impact entire families. The story became part of palace folklore, told and retold during staff gatherings and passed down to new generations of employees. It served as a reminder that true leadership could emerge from the most unexpected places and that doing the right thing was always worth the risk, regardless of one's age or position. Years later, as Princess Charlotte grew older and began taking on more official duties, palace staff would reference the garden party incident as the moment they knew she possessed the character necessary to be an exceptional royal. The courage she had shown as a child became the foundation for the respect and loyalty she would earn as an adult. The incident also influenced how other young members of the royal family were educated about their responsibilities. Charlotte's example became a teaching tool, showing that royal privilege came with the obligation to protect and serve others, especially those who might not be able to protect themselves. Guard Thompson continued his service with the Queen's Guard for many years, eventually becoming a trainer for new recruits. He would often tell them about the importance of maintaining their integrity and character, using his own experience as an example of how doing the right thing even when it seemed to create problems, would ultimately be recognized and rewarded. As Princess Charlotte grew from an 8-year-old child into a confident young woman, the garden party incident remained a defining moment that shaped both her character and her understanding of leadership. The courage she had shown that day became the foundation for many future acts of compassion and justice throughout her life. The story of her intervention became more than just palace folklore. It evolved into a powerful example of moral leadership that influenced how she approached every challenge and opportunity in her royal duties. When she encountered difficult situations in later years, she would often remember that afternoon when she chose to speak up despite her young age and the intimidating authority of Lady Pemberton. Guard Thompson, now a senior member of the Queen's Guard, often reflected on how that single moment had changed the trajectory of his entire career. The incident had taught him that integrity and kindness were noticed and valued, even when they seemed to create immediate problems. He had gone on to receive several commendations for his service and had become a mentor to younger guards, always emphasizing the importance of character over protocol. The relationship between Princess Charlotte and the palace staff had grown stronger over the years, built on the foundation of mutual respect established during that garden party. Staff members knew they could trust her to be fair and considerate, while she relied on their dedication and loyalty to help her fulfill her royal responsibilities effectively. Lady Pemberton, who had initially been embarrassed by the incident, eventually came to view it as one of the most important learning experiences of her career. She had developed a more balanced approach to leadership that combined necessary discipline with understanding and context. Her transformation from a rigid enforcer of rules to a thoughtful manager earned her respect from both senior officials and junior staff members. The ambassador's wife had returned to her home country with stories that enhanced the reputation of the British royal family throughout international diplomatic circles. Her account of Princess Charlotte's intervention had contributed to a positive image of the young royal that would prove valuable in future diplomatic relationships, and international goodwill. Educational institutions began using the story as a teaching tool for children learning about leadership, courage, and moral decision-making. Teachers would tell their students about the princess who stood up for what was right, encouraging them to find their own courage when faced with unfair situations in their schools and communities. The incident had also influenced how the royal family approached public relations and media coverage. Rather than hiding from stories that showed human moments of challenge and resolution, they began to embrace narratives that demonstrated the genuine character and values of family members. This authenticity resonated with the public and strengthened support for the monarchy. Princess Charlotte's parents, Prince William and Catherine, continued to reference that day when teaching their daughter and her siblings about their royal responsibilities. The garden party incident had proven that their approach to raising their children with strong moral foundations was working, giving them confidence in their parenting methods and family values. The story inspired other members of the royal family to be more aware of opportunities to support and protect those who served the monarchy. Young royals were encouraged to remember Princess Charlotte's example and to always consider how their actions could positively impact the lives of others around them. Guard Thompson eventually established a mentorship program for new palace employees, helping them understand not just their duties but also the values that should guide their service. He would share his own story as an example of how the royal family noticed and appreciated good character, encouraging new staff members to approach their work with integrity and compassion. Mrs. Davies incorporated the incident into the official orientation program for new palace staff, using it to illustrate the family's genuine care for their employees and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position in the hierarchy. This helped create a positive work culture that reduced turnover and increased job satisfaction among palace workers. The garden party incident had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of unfair authority. It showed that courage could come from the most unexpected sources, and that speaking up for what was right could create positive change, even in the most traditional and hierarchical environments. Years later, when Princess Charlotte faced her first major public controversy as an adult royal, she drew strength from remembering that day when she had stood up to Lady Pemberton. The confidence and moral clarity she had developed through that experience helped her navigate the challenges of public life with grace and determination. The story continued to inspire new generations of palace workers, royal family members, and ordinary citizens who heard it. It served as a reminder that true leadership wasn't about having the highest position or the most authority, but about having the courage to do what was right when it mattered most. The legacy of Princess Charlotte's intervention at the garden party became woven into the fabric of royal tradition, representing the best qualities of service, compassion, and moral courage that the monarchy strived to embody. It showed that even the youngest members of the royal family could make a significant difference through simple acts of kindness and bravery. As Princess Charlotte looked back on that transformative day, she understood that it had taught her the most important lesson of her royal education, that with privilege came the responsibility to protect others, and that true nobility was measured not by titles or ceremonies, but by the willingness to stand up for what was right, regardless of the personal cost.